Welcome to the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast. In today's episode, we discuss Treasury Skills, international teams, and Treasury recruitment with Pieter De Kiewit from Treasury Search. Pieter is passionate about recruitment and chose to focus only on Treasury. He mixes matchmaking with entrepreneurship, teaching, writing, moderating events, and being amazed by developments. Treasury Search is a niche recruitment boutique with a focus on interim and permanent positions in Treasury. 12 employees worked from the Netherlands and Germany and placed hundreds of candidates. In the episode of today, expect to learn what key skills should a treasurer in 2025 have or develop. What emerging trends or developments are shaping these skills requirements? What are the technical and soft skills or areas of expertise that are becoming more important in Treasury? What are the benefits of having an international Treasury team? How does someone's culture impact Treasury professionals in their day-to-day job? And, like always, much more. Pieter is honestly very impressive, very open-minded, and actually quite fun to chat with. We really hope you will enjoy the episode as much as we did. If that is the case, and when you think about how you found about our podcast, chances are that it was through word of mouth, social media, or a recommendation from your favorite podcast platform. And this is our only request to you. The only way we can get more and more amazing guests and get more people to learn about Treasury is thanks to you. So if you enjoy what you hear and maybe learn a thing or two, please consider following the show, leaving us a review, or sharing this episode to help others discover it too. With all that being said, please welcome Pieter De Kiewit. Hey, Pieter. Thank you so much for joining us on the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast. To begin with, we'd like to talk about the Treasurer of 2025. We'd like to dream a little bit. So what do you think would be the key skills that a Treasurer should have in 2025 or have or develop, actually? What's your take on that?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And thinking about 2025, I think it all starts off because I think this is for a lot of the audience, how to develop themselves. I think I want to mention first that it starts with finding out what drives you. So it's not so much about skills, gathering skills, because you can gather a lot of skills, but it makes sense to find out if you are a treasury technician or if you are a connector, a business person or anything like that. So start with thinking, why do I want to evolve, in what direction? What's the purpose for me in my career? And then start building up on that. And in general, what I see already over many years right now is that the really successful treasurers, in a sense, they go up in the org chart, become the director, become the group treasurer. If that's what you're looking for, and again, that's not for all of us, then making the connection to the business comes first. It is translating your expertise about cash, risk, corporate finance into what's relevant for the business. I think that is where it all starts off. That's not different for 2025 than for 2020 or 2015. I think a lot of aspects that are asked from many, let's say, employees right now, which are not Treasury specific, are also relevant for Treasury. So yeah, you've got your tax savvy, data driven people. Yeah, well, that's not a Treasury person question to ask, but it's for all people coming into the labor market right now. So I think 2025, find out what you want and build upon that, and then start developing your skills, be it technical, be it interpersonal, or whatever.
That's super interesting that you barely touched upon the actual technical skills. We quickly mentioned cash management, but we could imagine that in such a period that we are in 2023, July right now, that you could think, okay, managing financial risk will become key, but you focus more on the interpersonal, the soft skills actually. Why do you think it's that important?
Well, I think a lot of the treasury population has a lot of technical skills. So you see a lot quantitative detail-oriented people, tech-savvy also quite a few. And they've been in their traditional proverbial ivory tower, doing a good job. I think a lot of people who are listening into this podcast are about development, and I think getting better technical skills won't get you the exposure you need to go up in your career. It's there's this equation that says the effectiveness of your advice is not only the quality, but it's also the acceptance. And I think a lot of the treasurers don't focus on the acceptance. So they're talking about with their sales colleagues about FX risks, or with their CFO or even their CEO, and they lose traction because their audience is simply not interested enough. They are not finding a hook to bring it in. And TMI posted a article last week about Treasury not being sexy or making it sexy. Well, I think those people who can make Treasury sexy, those are the ones who move forward in their careers. So you have to think about who you're working with to get ahead. And that's all about people. And that's not about tables or colors or large Excel sheets. And don't get me wrong, those are also important. They remain important. But to make the next step is finding traction with your message there.
It's funny because that's our mission statement. Well, not exactly phrased like this, but we want to make corporate treasury sexy, Peter. So we're on it. But yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so what do you see as the emerging trends or developments that are shaping those skill requirements? Then what influences all this?
If you talk about skill development, I see that the very traditional ways of acquiring skills remain. So you go to your university and you get your degree, so that remains. I see a variation in, let's say, postgraduate skills. There's, of course, the ACT, the CTP. In the Netherlands, we've got the postgraduate at university. Those were obvious ways to get extra skills. And I think they're still relevant, but what you see with a lot of people, they develop themselves over events, over tutorials, over webinars, over acquiring a lot of extra skills, because I think the also from a certain to a certain degree, the standard educational institutions cannot catch up. It's for a university, it's hard to know what's happening in 2025 when they upgrade their curriculum every 5 years, and they did so in 2023. So you see a kind of a blended learning. That is what you see from a, let's say, how to acquire these skills, and going into the what kind of skills. Of course, the technology is quite prominent and it remains prominent, but also I think there it's what you get at the university. So the young graduates, be it economical, be it mathematical, but also the sociology people, they already come with programming skills. So the technology part is already ingrained in the current education. But if you are, let's say, not 25 or 35, perhaps you have to pick up a book or go to a course or whatever. And then I think there used to be focus a lot on cash management and pooling and TMSs and risk. There was a bit of a decrease. There was like companies were getting risk averse, technology kicking in. Well, if you had to call 10 banks 50 years ago, now you can use your 360T or your FXall. So there was a time that there was a decrease in risk skills development because there was no demand. Currently, that's changing again. You see your counterparty risk, you see banks defaulting, you see the volatility in interest rates and FX. People have to understand. So I do think that risk is becoming more important again in comparison to 5 or 8 years ago. So that might also mean that there's a shift towards the CFAs, the GARPs or FRM education type gets these risk aspects in again. There are some developments there, but that's the beauty of Treasury. It's constantly changing and it's hard to predict. So I think that's the fun in the field.
Super interesting the way you said that, because indeed, with the current news, what's been going on in the treasury world, banks defaulting, counterparty risk. A few of our guests have mentioned that now, that this is becoming more and more of a important topic. I also find interesting though that like there's like this, what you mentioned about this time delay in like something that's a big problem now, and then companies need to go out and start hiring to fill up that specific aspect of treasury a bit more rigorously. Treasurers need to upskill themselves on those topics much quicker as well. Have you seen something like this perhaps similar in the past, and how did it pan out? So if we're talking now, that's counterparty risk. With your experience in the recruiting world, what was that thing, I don't know, 5 years ago? What was the last time you saw this time delay happen in real life?
A good question. I think it happens constantly. So let's say the standard educational institutes are not known for being very swift in their changes. So I can mention many examples there. What I see from the recruitment industry, because I have two focus elements in my job. It's the recruitment side and it's the treasury side. Is, let's say, over the last 5 to 8 years, there's an increase in attention in it became a bit of a fashion thing, which I don't like that much, but agility. So I think agility is about not knowing everything, but having the skills, the competences, the mindset, the personality to deal with changes, changing environments, and me interviewing candidates and finding this out is also listening to people and telling about what went wrong. Okay, I had this plan, we executed, and it went totally pear-shaped, and then we had to change and readjust. This was the analysis, we adjusted this way, and then it worked out. That's what my clients and me like a lot, because that's a sign that somebody can work with changing aspect, whereas, let's say, others are kind of stuck in their ways. So people coming in and say, oh, I'm the guru, I'm the expert, I know everything about ethics, derivatives, listen to me and I will teach you. That's not necessarily wrong, but it's wrong for many positions. And that's only if you want a one-trick pony that would work right. And that's also not the people who can connect very well with the business. Those are the broadcasting types. And also from a recruit perspective, already for a very long time, we are always looking for ways to predict if somebody's successful. There are, let's say, measuring sticks you use to find out, will you be successful? And the obvious one, and not everybody will like to hear this, but it's simply IQ. IQ is a very good predictor of somebody being successful. Not a one-on-one, but let's say a 70%. So if you're smart enough and you did the, let's say, you did your homework and you graduated and you've shown that you're smart, then you can also apply the concepts you learned about risk management in ethics to commodities, to interest rates, because you can go beyond and apply what's relevant there and apply it into a new situation.
Going back to a soft skill again. So yeah, that's interesting. We started with a hard skill question, and it somehow wound back at a soft skill once again, which is pretty.
Yeah, but it's funny that you said it's a soft skill. For me, it could be, and it depends on your definition. For me, the whole agility and the whole cognitive part of somebody being also smart and analytical, for me, that's not a soft skill. It's also not something you can acquire. That's either God's gift or whoever you want to blame, but it's there used to be times that I had this idealistic view, so you can make your own future if you put your mind to it, but we just have to accept that some people are more talented in certain aspects than others. And that doesn't make one better or worse than the other, but better for this one position or not.
I understand why that could trigger some people. So that's a fair answer. So focusing on what's within your sphere of control, are there skills that you have seen, whether those are soft or hard, which treasury professionals can work on and improve that do put them in better positions, and what are they?
Yeah, I think in skills, it's if you know from yourself, going back to my kickoff, if you know I am the analytical type, and then let's say the treasury technician, and that's how you are driven. I think if you want to develop from that path, I think you should study business concepts. How do we make our money? So let's say take the MBA, and then really go into the books and go through the value chain and teach yourself how does this company operate and where do we make the money, and then connect that to your cash and your excess cash and to your risk and start structuring excellent solutions. If that's how you're wired, go that direction. If you know I want to go up and I've got more let's say the communication, people skills, and I want to develop those, I think it all starts with going out, listening to business leaders, listen to their strategy, and translate that in messages that will come across. So it's communication skills, but it starts all with the listening part. So, okay, I know the CEO wants to expand into that region. Then I have to talk about that topic, but also I have to think about, okay, what are the words that he is using? Is he a profit, a upside driven person? Okay, what kind of solutions does he want to hear from me to improve the upside? Or the CFO is cost cutting, and does he want me to speak in euros, or does he want me to speak in action points? So we had one workshop one day. It was a insights driven workshop. I'm not a big fan of insights, but it's the red and the blue and the green and the yellow personality types, and we kind of helped people to find out what type they were. And in this audience, we had this group, we're 25 or 30 people. And they were predominantly blue in that typology. So that meant...
You explain that a little bit.
Yeah, it's very much you are driven by the numbers, black and white, very analytical, very, very rational. A lot of CFOs are in that typology, they are red, and red are assertive, and they are result-oriented, and they want to score. So if you would come in as a blue person, you would have a big data sheet. You would have your Excel and your pie chart and your everything. And you would take your time and you have a build up to your point you want to bring across. That red person, the CFO, would be totally bored, out of his mind. So you start with the results and you would say, okay, I come in and I can show you how we can sink cost in our bank relations by 1.5 million annually. Do I have your attention? And when he says yes, or she says yes, then you continue. So that's very much a communication skill, which is very trainable, which is almost like a trick that starts with, okay, how do I wrap up my message to make it digestible for this person? Very trainable.
We started with all of that was self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Is really understanding what your type is and who you are and what's your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then from there, where do you need to play? I think that makes sense.
Yeah, what I see a lot, but that's a bit of perhaps I mention it too often, but I see too many people living the ambitions of the people around them. They come in and say, I want to be a group treasurer. Okay, why do you want to be a group treasurer? Is it the car? Is it the money? Is it what kind of challenge? Or perhaps your spouse said, okay, you are already in this job for 6 years. Now it's time to do something new. And then you have to think, is this the proper reason for me to start a career change? Or should I better stay with what drives me instead of the drivers of others for me?
Oh, it makes sense. And we'll put a link in the description for the audience who might not know about this personality test. So we'll put a link towards that. Yeah. Pieter, so we've talked about in general and the focus on the soft skills, which I really love because I think a soft skill is harder to develop than a hard one, but most of them could be developed, right, through training and reps.
Right.
So when we look at the treasurer's role, how does that one potentially varies across industries? If so, if not, it's like rinse and repeat, that's fine. But I believe there will be nuances.
Yeah.
And how does this impact the required skill sets? Have you seen differences in your experience?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've seen me stepping into recruitment in this job type is also because a lot of treasurers can work in a lot of industries. So you can move relatively quickly from one industry to another, but there are big differences. So for the obvious one, the non-for-profit treasurer is totally different from the profit-driven treasurer or the profit company. But that's an obvious one. But two examples, we work for a lot of clients in this soft commodities industries, a lot of traders. And what you see over there is that, of course, risk and risk related to the core business is important. But also the traders in a trading company are very prominent and they will enter your room as a treasurer. So you have to be able to stand up, because if you don't, they will tell you how to do your job, because their results, which are connected to their bonuses, are also influenced by how you deal with in the financial markets. So what we see is that for instance, commodity traders, we need more extroverted treasurers who are very much aware of ethics. And for instance, we worked for all market leaders in the telecom industry, and there, of course, payments are very prominent because it's so many people paying their phone bill every month. And of course, luckily, treasurers don't have to deal with every single payment, but they have to be aware what's happening in a company where every month millions of payments come in, and how to automate and organize the whole thing. So industries do have an impact. I wouldn't say that you can train for a certain industry. Of course, if you want to, it makes sense to be aware of that. But you do see that people move slowly into one or the other direction. So that has an impact.
It's funny to see that. I mean, from my understanding, it's more, the differences will not that much be on the soft skill side, but more the hard ones, right? And the knowledge you need to develop around payments or risk. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And you as a recruiter, what have you seen as being the requirements for companies when they look for their next or their group treasury or treasury professionals in general? Like if we flip the question.
Yeah. If I understand you well, this is specifically what do companies look for in their next group treasurer? Yeah, it's
correct.
For me, that's. I think there's even a book by the name that says, "What got you here won't get you there." What I see is that there are different career stages. Let's say let's take 3. So you come in as a young graduate, and you have to be eager, and you have to be smart enough, but you don't have any directly usable skills. So you have to be trainable and eager and go. And then in the mid segment, you are recruited for direct applicable skills. That's also a part of the labor market where we have a lot of work. Okay, we are implementing Kyriba, Nomentia. We are doing a new thing in ethics. So we want somebody who has done this before because we want direct applicable skills. So that's the mid segment, and the source for the next level, of course, the director, the group treasurer, and everything related to that. So what gets you into the mid segment is your experience and your skills in that field. But if you go and want to be a group treasurer, you should be aware that your exposure and the expectations are different. So you are expected to lead a team and inspire a team and to staff a team. And you have to be able to translate this. CFO says, okay, we are going to acquire this company. Okay, what does it mean? You have to think about the more strategic part. And what you very often see is the traditional, the best sales guy becomes sales director. And then you lose your best sales guy and you get a dreadful people manager back. And that's still also what's happening in Treasury. So your best technical treasurer becomes the boss, and he scares away all people, and he cannot communicate with the CEO. So what gets you there at the next level is not anymore the technical skills, because you've proven that you've got the technical skills. You open the book, you've got the proper IQ, you know the solutions. Now you have to show that you can inspire, analyze the business as a whole, be prominent and responsible for a whole team. And that's also where you are in a mid-career stage. Your career will be managed to a certain extent. So your boss will tell you, okay, let's have a annual review. What shall we do with your education? What do you want? What do you like? And if you are a group treasurer, your CFO will say, hey, your career advancement is your problem. So if you want somebody, you come and claim it and you convince me, but you get the big bucks. So you are expected to take the own responsibility for your own team, your own career. So if you are at a certain level, you have to act the role. So I think for people who want to move up to group treasurer, it's a bit of a mental shift. It's taking responsibility. So you don't get a group treasurer role. You go out and get it. You go out and get it. You claim it.
And what would be coming back to one of the things you said earlier, what would be your advice for those people who might be extremely technical, very good at their job? I mean, naturally you get promoted because that's a bit how the system and the companies work. If you stay long enough, quote unquote, and if you prove technical efficiency, eventually you climb the corporate ladder. Where it's not always the right choice for the company, because as you said, some people might be outstanding at selling, but when they get a leadership role, it's all of a sudden much of a different ballgame. But so what's your recommendation for those people who are extremely technical, who want to evolve in their career, because eventually they don't want to stay there their whole life, right? So what's the right approach when you are in those shoes?
Well, first about your last quick assumption, there are people who want to stay in their role forever. I used to have a boss who mentioned the ambition of a dentist. If you study dentistry, you are 26 and you know what you will do until 67 or 70 or whatever. And the current world says, okay, you have to move up. Well, for start with, it's not a default to go up or out or whatever. If it's your choosing. But if you want to go up and you want to change and make the next step, I think it makes sense if you, for instance, extremely driven and technical treasurer in ethics, go to the company with the biggest ethics exposures, be it the banks, be it the trading companies, be it the most international ones. And even then you can perhaps hit the ceiling. Well, there's something called the Peter principle. I don't know if you know it, but that's a theory that says that you always in your career go up until you went too far, and then you will bounce back because you hit your head and you didn't do well there. If you can prevent it, it would be nice, because it's not always nice to hit your head. And at one stage in your career, if you say, okay, there's no better place in the world for me, given my expertise, you can perhaps stay in your job and diversify. So I know of people who are the best in the trade finance, who are also teachers, work at universities, or do a lot of speaking events or write books or anything. You can be the global expert or the national expert in one field, and that can also already be enough. But I think it starts with the acceptance of, okay, I know this is what drives me. What are the consequences of this? Because this is all not rocket science. Everybody can think of this and the effects of that. But I think analyzing and understanding is not the hard part. It's the acceptance. It's accepting that there's somebody who's a junior, who's now, who will be next to you in 3 years, and will be your boss in 5 years. Some egos cannot handle that, but yeah, well.
Peter, so I've learned most about Treasury. You don't really get Treasury departments in companies until they reach a certain size, right? Before that, Treasury can typically be managed by the finance functions. A Treasury department is typically only there when you're a company that has some complexity to their Treasury that requires that, which typically would branch internationally, which means that you deal with lots of different cultures, lots of different nationalities. What kind of challenges does that bring? Because I mean, being a recruiter in the treasury space specifically means that you're almost, maybe not exclusively, but most of the places that you're placing and most of the people you're seeing going into roles and out of roles are in that multicultural, multinational environment.
Yeah.
And how does that make building of treasury teams different to different, like accounting teams, for example? And how does the cultural aspect play in that?
I think this topic, I like that you touch upon this one. I think it doesn't get the attention it deserves. Perhaps it's a timing aspect, but indeed, by default, treasury is international. And if you compare, for instance, with accounting has so many more people on average, so they don't feel the impact of the international as much as the treasury team, which is very often way smaller, and the activities are also very often cross-border. And I see it doesn't get the attention, and sometimes that leads to frustration. And sometimes it's just there are other topics that dominate or people leave. So for instance, to make it more specific and tangible, I organized a roundtable session for European treasurers working for Japanese headquarters. And that was very, very interesting, because the whole approach to doing business is so different from a Japanese company towards a European company or specifically Anglo-Saxon company. So what kind of blew me away the first time I heard it, I was talking to a Japanese company and they were based in the Netherlands. So I said, well, I assume you are also here because for fiscal aspects and fiscal optimization, because, hey, that's the reality in corporate treasury. And this Japanese man said, that's totally not the case, because we consider it an honor to pay taxes. And I really had to think, an honor to pay taxes. So his mindset was, we want to contribute to a society. And that's so very different from what our mindset is towards business, that I really had to get my head around it. And also what you for instance saw with the people in this round table, it said, okay, we went in and we saw tons of opportunity to, for instance, sink cost, because these Japanese banks, they have high fees. So they build a business case and they can cut costs in half. And then they present to their bosses in Japan, and they hear absolutely nothing. And they present again, and they present again, and then they're frustrated. But the mindset in Japan, it's the whole concept of keeping face is like, well, Chinese or Japanese to Dutch people, for instance, the Japanese bosses don't want to tell their employees that this plan will not fly, because their relationship with their banks is already there for dozens or hundreds of years, and they will not change the relationship. So this plan will not be applied. But it's not told to the European people. That, of course, is one of many examples where things can be very, well, let's say at least interesting. And I think this whole, if you want to tackle it or you want to do with it, it all starts with awareness. Yeah, and we Dutch are known to be rude, loud, direct, and everything. And I think it's totally just so. But I see a lot of the fellow Dutch people. Well, to give another example, I dealt a lot with Romanian, and there were a lot of smart Romanian people in the room and Dutch people. And what you heard was only Dutch people. And then after a while, in an email, it turned out that the Romanian people had the best solution. So what the Dutch people would say is, those Romanian people should speak up. That was the solution of Dutch people. But what they didn't think, we Dutch people, perhaps we should shut up more and listen and give them the time to speak up and tell what they got to bring. And I think there's a wealth of things that we can get there, and we could be so much better in treasury and other fields. But It's very much untapped.
How do treasury professionals proactively avoid such situations, Peter? Like self-awareness, I understand self-awareness is a big thing, but it's hard to be self-aware. Like I've worked with Dutch people, I've also worked with Japanese people. I tell you, the Dutch people don't realize they're being loud and things just out of this, just naturally how they're raised and who they are. They just don't realize it, but it's hard to be self-aware like that.
Yeah.
Especially in business context, especially when you have a specific problem in front of you, especially when you're a problem-solving type to try and want to find the best solution, and you worked with your peers in that culture for so much, you're used to people just chipping in. Like, have you seen people just do it very, very well? And have you seen people start very poor and develop the skill to be able to handle that very well? I think more interested in that second one.
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure that tomorrow I have the right person for you right now. I had a few examples there, and don't get me wrong, no research here and no preparation. I see a lot of women doing very well here. I don't suggest, well, I don't claim a correlation, but all the examples that pop up are women there. And I do see that in our home market, which is the Netherlands, that there are quite a few, for instance, people from, again, Romania or Eastern European people stepping up. They land, they do well, they keep their eyes and ears open, and they take the best of all worlds and then advance relatively quickly. And that could be also because they bring, let's say, the work ethics, how they were raised, long hours, and blend them into the, let's say, more prominent communication skills, and those two combined lead to a situation that they pass their local peers, because and this is also totally cliche, but from let's say statistically, there are, let's say, from a working attitude, a lot of the millennials from Western Europe don't spend as many hours as, let's say, the Indian, Romanian, Chinese, Japanese. And this I say totally without any value. So the one is not better than the other, but hey, it makes total sense. If you work more hours, you get more done, and that's visible.
Makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
So that will be focusing on maybe the challenges and potential difficulties of having inherently such a structure, right, of international treasury teams. What would be the benefits then? What do you see as being the driving force of such structure and cultural differences?
Well, before we talked about the connection between the business and treasury, and I think treasury should mirror, guide, support business. It's a support function, and I think if you are aware what's happening in the business anywhere in the world, you will be a better treasurer for it. And if you at the same time support your Brazilian colleagues as well as your Indian as well as your Greek colleagues, and you are somehow aware of what this different in doing business means, then you will be a better treasurer for it. And also, I think well, you know about banks. Banks in various countries operate in different ways. You negotiate it in different way. And there's no one way which is the best. So the local way is best for that country. So you should listen and act upon that. So I think that's the biggest upside. At the same time, you have to be true to yourself and your own company culture, because also I think, especially in current day and age, ethics and morals around the world are not the same, and I think you can fill a whole extra podcast about that. So let's not go in that direction. But how people operate in Russia or in the Middle East or in the UK or in Japan, yeah, well, that's an interesting topic extra on top of that.
Absolutely enough for a complete episode.
Yeah.
And And so what will be we've talked a lot about skills, right? What will be the specific skills that are important for working in or leading actually an international treasury team? So I think you mentioned self-awareness that is coming back quite often, like reflection, being able to question yourself and evolve based on that.
Yeah.
The way you talk about it, I feel listening, and more precisely active listening, is key. Because of course you want to, stand up for yourself, and back to the group treasurer example, that want to evolve, be able to advocate for your own growth and evolution. But listening is a key part. What else is out there that is necessary to work in an international treasury team?
Well, what you mentioned or what you summarized is already quite a bit and quite a challenge, I think, for a lot of people. And I think the natural curiosity, constantly know what's happening, listen to podcasts like these, reading. And I think that's hard. I see for myself, and perhaps you recognize this, if you have a job and you have a lot to do, and then you also want to follow the news, and you want to follow what's relevant in Treasury, and it's various countries, and in my case, it's Treasury and recruitment, and in your case, it's other fields. So it's also digesting vast amounts of information and know what's important and relevant and what's not, and also how this changes. So really switching off every sentence for as of, let's say, 5:30 in the evening, and start again 8:30, 9 the next day. I think that's impossible if you want to move forward. But I think that also that connects to curiosity, being inquisitive.
Yeah, and if it's curiosity, it's also for your own benefit. You see it less as work potentially, right? So this notion of time becomes a bit more blurry.
Yeah, and also not very, think beyond the obvious. Know what's happening. Not only read all the treasury magazines, but also pick up a newspaper and know about other stuff.
100% makes lots of sense. Pieter, obviously this conversation makes me think about a hot topic, even though that's a topic that has been going on for a few years now, but diversity and inclusion. Do you see, as a recruiter, as this being more and more of a requirement from your clients? And maybe to go a bit beyond just that question, because I suspect what the answer is, how do you include that into your research, and what are the clear benefits of it, if any? I suspect there is, but
I see with diversity that it's partly very sincere and very relevant and successful. It's partly greenwashing, but hey, that's or a variation on greenwashing. I see quite a few of my clients who are very active, in the sense like they say, okay, we want more women, present female candidates, period. And also choose the female candidates. Not even the qualities are more or less the same. So that's a tricky part, because we all know the discussion there. Do you want that? Do you want to do positive discrimination? We have one client who is demanding anonymous CVs, and match reports, which is not easy. And so if you want to take out gender, age, nationality, what's left in there, there's quite a bit taken out of the CV. But I must say that the results are very good, very objective, good matches there. So that's what I see. So there's productivity goes from clients. With those companies who have this diversity brought into their companies, I see also more stability in the team, and also whole other topics being brought up, which in my perception pan out very well. So I think in the aspects we mentioned before, let's say connection to the business, stability, skills level development, diversity in bringing in people from all over the world, focusing on gender, brings new topics that make treasury teams better and more stable. Did I do research? No. Can I mention the examples? Yes. And also in our own team, we have quite a diverse team, male, female, Syrian, German, Bulgarian, Dutch. I think it makes a better, smarter team, and it's also more fun. But it could be my personal preference there.
No, indeed. I think it's something that's come up quite a few times as well in previous conversations, and also in, I think, stuff that Kim and I have seen in our own personal working lives as well. Diversity of opinion especially makes always for better solutions, right? So, and diversity of opinion can often come from diversity of experiences. So definitely something. So that's a nice link into what we wanted to get to next, which was we want you, Pieter, to speak to the hiring managers side as well. So I think you've spoken a lot to the recruitees, let's say, the people who want to get recruited into a treasury role. But if I'm someone inside a treasury department that needs to go about filling up my treasury department, I have specific needs. Maybe I'm particularly worried about counterparty risk at the moment, and that's something that I feel like I need to build out a little bit more. But speak more generally, what's the right approach that treasury professionals need to apply when they get to recruiting? Is it different for treasury versus other functions, for example, or is it quite common across?
Partly different. I think the big difference in comparison to other finance functions, for instance, is that treasury is too small to have a lot of standardized ways. So if you recruit in accounting or control or IT, there's so much standardization in education and career paths. It's all done, and we all know that org charts for treasury teams in various companies are very different. So even if the companies are totally similar, they can have totally different structured treasury teams. And of course, only a very few treasury is a conscious career choice. So that's a big difference. So that means that if you are recruiting for a graduate, it's much more about finding the right personality and look beyond the standard skills, because somebody doesn't come in with cash management skills because that is not taught at the university. Where you go next steps, then there are a lot of similarities. So if you are recruiting for a media, I think in general what I observe right now, even more than in the past, is that taking ownership, responsibility for the whole recruitment process is key. And I see for a lot of hiring managers, as we call them, so senior treasurers, treasury managers hiring new people into their team, a lot of hiring managers think they can delegate the ownership of finding a new staff member to a internal recruiter. And my perception, that's not a smart choice, because this internal recruiter does not feel your pain. He does not feel you and your team member sitting in the evening because there's an empty chair in your team. This internal recruiter has 25 other vacancies and yours is one of them. So taking ownership, thinking about what's necessary in my team and then act upon it, that's, in my perception, very much underappreciated. And it's also, and that's totally to my liking, don't get me wrong, for a lot of hiring managers, recruiting staff is a chore. It's a task they do not like. They do not like writing texts about who they want. They do not like to advertise, screen CVs, doing interviews. And that's great, because that, as a treasury recruiter, keeps us alive. But you cannot walk away from your responsibilities. So I think that's the same in for any hiring manager out there. Yeah.
I was going to say an internal recruiter, though, would have a much better grasp over, for example, company culture, right? And if someone that they're looking towards off the bat is someone that would fit the company culture, their background, their experience or whatnot. I guess there's always a pro and con to each thing, right?
Yeah. No, but don't get me wrong. I don't want to put internal recruiters in offside position. I think they have their value, but you cannot 100% delegate to them. So I think the treasurer should also know the company culture, but it's totally fine if the hiring manager delegates, but then don't drop the ball. Be in the process, be on top of the process. Also, because a lot of the internal recruiters are not able to screen CVs because they don't understand treasury. What's an RCF? What's cash pooling? What does TNS stand for? That's it's too hard to teach an internal recruiter the treasury lingo. So you cannot step away from the whole process. And it happened more often than once that we are, as an agency, included in a search. where the company tried themselves or through another agency. They were not successful. And at the end of the day, we placed a candidate that already applied before because the internal recruiter was not able to understand the CV, rejected the candidate, and then we reintroduced the candidate and the candidate was placed. That's for me an example that the hiring manager stepped away too far away from the process. And that's a shame for them, not for us, but hey.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I guess indeed, there's this indeed certain skills. It's a good point about the treasury lingo, and because treasury is a little bit more niche. I mean, that's why we started Corporate Treasury 101 to begin with, was to be able to break down that lingo for everyone involved. We've talked a lot about soft skills being super important. I understand that. I also understand that's definitely the case because of what you just mentioned there as well, which is that there's no standardized path into treasury, right? People coming from all over things. So a lot of the time you can't say, okay, I want someone that studied this degree, that did this job, that did that, because that's a unicorn if you're ever going to find it. Plus, that's not going to warrant success in treasury, right? But are there any like qualifications or hard backgrounds or hard things that hiring managers should look out for that typically make good treasury managers in broad sense of the thing? Maybe there's a lot of certifications out there, for example. Is that
treasury qualifications are always good. It's like also if people say, I am at an academic level, but I didn't graduate, there you have a question mark. You know, okay, it's nice of you to say, but let me assess, because I don't believe you based upon what you say there. Whereas if somebody graduated and he has the diploma or she has the diploma, then you can assume the level is there. And that's the same for treasury. So treasury qualifications, great. And perhaps we steer into a situation that they will be standardized and you should have them. But that's not the situation we're currently at. It's only like 10 or 15% as a formal qualification there. So qualifications are great, but they are not, if you've got them, they are not the ticket to the top. They are not the guarantee. And also if you hire people, if they've got the qualification, that's great. It makes things easier, but you should not ignore the rest of the candidates who are also in the funnel. And of course, there are only a few formal that are very recognized. So you've got, for the US, you've got the CTP. For continental Europe or the world, you've got your ACT modules. In the Netherlands, you've got your Register Treasurer. In Germany, you've got your Verband Deutsche Treasurer, VDT, who have some qualifications there. And they are in similar size and they all have value. And if you also have, for instance, like a CFA or FRM GARP, it's all very, very valuable. And perhaps we will get to a situation where they will be at the same level as the CPA and the CMA titles in finance and control. But that's not that. We've got a long way to go to get there.
So are there any hard skills you would definitely think that you have to have? Sorry.
Well, from hard skills, if somebody wants to invest in it first, I would say Excel. Excel, the most used TMS out there. So I think if you lack Excel skills, start over there, because I think in all treasury departments, Excel skills are highly appreciated. And then perhaps some CBA on top of that, then you're the king very often. So that would be hard skills. That's where it starts. And I think if you go next level, then it's all about understanding what's happening under the hood. Because, for instance, there used to be times that you had to know about specific TMSs. Oh, you should know about Kyriba or Bellin or whatever. Right now, we are at the level that people say, okay, we understand what a TMS more or less does. And if you implemented one or you used one, if you see one to a certain extent, you've seen them all.
Do you see requirements around accounting? It's something I've always wondered. Like, are any accounting skills of any sort required? For instance, one of the main functions of the treasurer would be to hedge, right? Financial risk, which gives the need to do hedge accounting. Is any form or sort of accounting training background, you mentioned the CPA earlier, sometimes necessary for a treasury role, or that's not something you see that much?
it's always appreciated, and only in 10 to 15% of the assignments we have, it's a must, especially for the formal treasury accountant. And what you see over there, very often at least, if they are not well paid, it's very often a formal requirement that is not really necessary. So they say, oh, it should be an IS 39 or an IFRS 16 or whatever. And then in real life, it's not that necessary. Or it's high level. And then you've got people who are making already 130,000 K with 5 or 6 years experience because they've got a very complex book full stuffed with derivatives. And that very much connects to also what we started this podcast with. I see so many people who are forced into treasury accounting, hating it, and not being able to follow up on it and spend 50, 60% of their time in treasury accounting because it's easy to hate job. You can force yourself into it and make a lot of money, but I think that's not sustainable.
It's a painful exercise.
Oh, yeah. I think you know best, the three of us.
About a small idea. One last question, sorry, Peter, around those recruitment aspects and how to retain talents. Can you share some best practices around attracting to begin with and then retaining top talents in treasury?
I will not mention any names, but I see the companies where teams are managed well, where they are able to retain talent, bring in the proper talent, bring them forward. It's the place where modern labor market approach is applied. And for me, that's very much operating at same eye level. That's, let's say, a mature communication between employee and boss about what's necessary for this team. Where do we want to go as a team? Where do you want to go as a person? But also, do you want to be rewarded? What's important in your life? Are you focusing on your family? Are you focusing on your career progression, on money aspects? And then together find the same common ground where you can move forward. And on the flip side, where do I see where things do not work very well? That's the company, the more traditional approach, where a potential boss says, well, we have great news. We decided that you can work with us. And you shut up, we tell you what you will earn, and then you sign, and then you start working for us. Because that's not how it works anymore. It's meeting at the same eye level and having mature dialogues. So that's what I see. And as an example, I think it's in the news and already for a longer period of time. But for instance, Nike worldwide, I think even globally, do not keep track or administration on vacation days. If you work in a team over there, you've got your responsibility. You have to take care your job is done. And if you want to go on vacation, you should. And of course, people should know you do, but we don't count the days you're on vacation. I must say I'm 53, so that's kind of quite a threshold for me. But it's a sign that you treat your staff responsible and you expect from them to show responsible behavior.
Wow. Peter, do you know if Nike is recruiting in treasury by any chance? Do you have any insight on it? No, that makes a lot of sense. And I like the way you bring it. It's not one size fits all, right? It's not to promise you're going to grow or you're going to have a work-life balance. It's more about the communication you have with your employees. Say, okay, what do you want? And let's strive to go that direction. To go in that direction.
Yeah, and that also connects to the current tightness in the labor market in accepting both 60-year-olds and 30-year-olds in the same position. So knowing what is the task at hand and how relevant is, for instance, age, which is almost never. And of course, an average 60-year-old person has other drivers than a 30-year-old. Well, that's not fine as long as they do the job.
Makes a lot of sense. Peter, that was amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to add on the different topics we've discussed? International teams, the advices for hiring managers, or more generally around the treasury of 2025? Anything else we didn't mention that you'd like to bring up?
No, I think we covered quite a lot. And my suggestion, be honest to yourself and as a treasurer, and keep an eye on what makes you happy. And a good treasury job, of course, makes you happy, but there's so much more to life. So be honest to yourself. I think that would be it.
It's a beautiful closing remark, Pieter. But we do have one more question for you, which is a bit of a new segment that we ask all of our guests at the end of our episodes now. Where do you see the role of AI in the world of treasury going forward? We haven't really talked about it at all. How do you think it's going to change the world of treasury from your professional experience?
There will be a huge impact. And I think the speed is decided upon acceptance, as with so many developments. So you can already buy a self-driving car, but it's not allowed through all kinds of acceptance through law and everything. And I think that's the same with AI in treasury. I think AI can do a lot of, especially of the standard tasks already, but it's not accepted. I don't think that group treasurers and the CFOs are willing to give up the wheel. So I think for now, there's a lot of research and experimenting to be done. Also there, I think it's not specific to treasury. What is specific, of course, to treasury is we're talking about money, and in treasury teams for large amounts of money, and it always makes things more complex or more important. So I think the thoroughness applied will be much higher, and I think it's exciting times, but at the same time, it will take a while. And if you go back, I'm now 30 years in recruitment and in treasury. There already have been quite a few times that people said, okay, this is the next big change and everything will be different. And I don't want to sound cynical because I think in 30 years this might be the biggest one. But I don't think if we will meet again in 5 years in another podcast that only 10% remained of treasury and 90% is different. But okay, perhaps
has been said. Pieter, that's amazing. Thank you so much. If people would like to know more about you, Treasury Search or Treasury Excel, where should they go?
I think the obvious way to go is LinkedIn, of course. Our website, Treasurer Search, is a dreadful word, but Treasurer Search is the name of my company. So we've got our website. LinkedIn is very prominent in our markets, post regularly on Treasury Excel. And of course, we'll be at Eurofinance and all the big events, ATEL, DACT, etc., etc. So, that would be the obvious way to go. And I suppose we'll have another session in the future. So also Treasury 101.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, indeed. No, perfect. We'll put all the links in the description. Pieter, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And
thank you.
See you next time.